My name is Margaret, but people simply call me Grandma Maggie. I was not always strong. In fact, there was a time in my life when I cried so much that even my tears became tired. I moved into that old house 5 years before the night my landlord disgraced me. Back then, I was just a woman trying to survive after my husband passed. I had little money, just enough to rent a small room with a leaking roof, but I was grateful. At least it was a place to sleep. The landlord, Mr. Thompson, looked like a quiet man at first. He smiled like a good person. He spoke softly. He acted like someone who understood hardship. So when he told me he had one small room left, I didn't think twice. The first few months were peaceful. I did my sewing work from home. People brought clothes for me to stitch, and I used the money to buy food. I was managing. Life was not sweet, but it was moving. Then one day, everything changed. It started with small things. The landlord began knocking on my door late at night, pretending he wanted to check if everything was okay. Sometimes he stayed longer than necessary, asking questions that made me uncomfortable. I always gave short answers because something about him felt wrong. One evening, he brought me a plate of food. I thanked him, but I didn't touch it. Something in my spirit told me not to. He watched me too closely. His eyes were not normal eyes. They looked like someone planning something. I avoided him after that, but he kept coming. Another day, he came again, this time to fix the leaking roof. But he didn't touch the roof. He stood too close to me, smiling in a strange way. I stepped back. He stepped forward. I stepped to the side. He blocked my way. That was the first time he told me I was too beautiful to suffer alone. I didn't like it. I never encouraged him. But he didn't stop. Weeks passed, and he became bolder. Each time I rejected his strange comments, he became angrier. I didn't know his anger would one day become a storm that would throw me into the street. At this time of my life, things were going up and down like a seesaw. I was grateful for customers who brought sewing work, but every coin I earned went into feeding myself. I could barely pay rent, and the landlord knew that. That was the part that scared me the most. He knew I was vulnerable. One day, he told me I could pay my rent in another way. I pretended not to understand. But I did. Deep in my bones, I did. I told him, "Sir, please don't say that again." He laughed, a wicked kind of laugh. The next month, I managed to gather half of my rent. I brought it to him with hope in my eyes, but he pushed it back. "I don't want your money," he said. "I want you." My heart broke. My knees became weak. I didn't even know what to do next. I begged him to collect the money, but he refused. From that day, he started frustrating me every chance he got. He increased the light bill. He insulted me in front of other tenants. He even threatened to disconnect my water. But I still held my ground. I refused him every single time. Little did I know that my refusal would lead to the night he threw me out like trash. Back to that terrible night, the night everything I feared actually happened. When he locked me outside the house and walked away, I felt empty, like someone removed my heart and left a hole in my chest. The rain fell harder. The cold breeze slapped my skin. I was alone, completely alone. Or so I thought. Because that was the moment I heard those slow footsteps behind me. My hand froze on my bag handle. My breath stopped in my chest. I didn't have the strength to run. I didn't even have the strength to turn back. The footsteps came closer, and closer, and closer, until whoever it was stood right behind me. I slowly turned my head, and when I saw who it was, my heart almost stopped beating. I screamed, because that person should not have been there. Not at that hour. Not in that darkness. Not behind me. And that moment was when the real story of my life began. But just as I opened my mouth to speak, just as I tried to take one step back, something happened that changed the entire direction of my destiny. The person behind me suddenly grabbed my shoulder. I gasped, and the night shook again. The hand on my shoulder felt cold, too cold for a human touch. For one long second, my whole body locked like a door bolt. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't blink. I couldn't move. My heart was beating so loudly that I almost thought the whole street could hear it. The rain fell harder, soaking my hair and clothes, but I didn't even feel it. All I felt was fear. I slowly turned around, and there stood Mr. Benson, my old neighbor from 2 streets away. A man I had not seen in almost 3 years. A man who walked with a limp after an accident. A man who didn't like going out at night. That was why seeing him standing there, at that hour, under heavy rain, felt like seeing a ghost. "Maggie," he said, his voice cracking as he looked at my wet bag on the floor. "Why are you outside? What happened?" My lips shook as I tried to speak, but the words refused to come out. My throat felt like it was tied with rope. He looked at me closely, and something in his eyes changed. It was a mix of pity and anger. The kind of anger that grows only when someone sees injustice. "Did he do this?" Mr. Benson asked quietly. "Did that wicked landlord throw you out?" I nodded, just one small nod. But that nod opened a floodgate inside me. Tears ran down my face faster than the rain. I wanted to explain everything. I wanted to tell him how the landlord had tormented me for months, how he tried to force himself on me, how he got angry because I refused him, how he pushed me out like I was a dirty rag, but I couldn't speak. My tears were the voice for me that night. Mr. Benson looked at the landlord's window, shook his head, and muttered, "Heartless man." Then he picked up my wet bag and said, "Follow me, you can't stay here." I hesitated, not because I didn't trust him, but because the shock of what had happened still held my legs hostage. But he placed his hand gently on my back and whispered, "Let's go." That was the moment I took the first step away from the house that had brought me so much pain. As we walked through the dark street, he held an umbrella over me, even though it barely covered both of us. The rain kept splashing on our feet. The wind kept pushing us sideways. But we walked, slowly, quietly, like two shadows moving in the night. When we reached his small home, he opened the door and helped me inside. The warmth inside the room hit me like a hug. It was small but neat, just a bed, a chair, and a table. He handed me a dry towel and said, "Sit, let me get you hot water." I sat on the edge of the bed, still shaking. Not from the cold anymore, but from everything that had happened. How could life swing from peace to chaos in just one night? When he returned with a cup of hot water, he sat beside me and waited until I was calm enough to talk. "Maggie, tell me what happened." And for the first time that night, I found my voice. I told him everything. From the first day the landlord made those strange comments to the night he became bold enough to demand what I could never give him. I told him how I struggled to pay rent, how the landlord rejected my money, how he threatened to disconnect my water, how he came that night, forced his way in, grabbed my arm, and pushed me out of the house. When I finished talking, silence filled the room, heavy silence. Mr. Benson finally breathed out and said, "Some men are monsters." I nodded because he was right. The landlord was not just wicked, he was dangerous. Mr. Benson looked at me with gentle eyes and said, "You're safe here tonight. Tomorrow, we will figure out something." His words were simple, but they felt like medicine to my wounded spirit. I finally lay down on the bed while he slept on the floor beside the door, like a guard protecting a queen. That night, sleep came to me slowly. Every time I closed my eyes, I remembered the landlord's face, his anger, his threats. I remembered him grabbing my bag and throwing it out. I remembered the sound of the door slamming shut behind me. The shame, the fear, the pain. But somewhere in the middle of the night, while listening to the soft rain outside, I made a quiet promise to myself. No matter what happens, I will never let that man destroy me. The next morning came with sunlight creeping through the window. I woke up feeling heavy, but at least I was safe. Mr. Benson had already boiled water and made tea. "You have to think of your next step," he said kindly. My next step. Where would I go? Where would I sleep? How would I survive? I sat there, staring at my hands, feeling lost. Just then, someone knocked on the door. Mr. Benson opened it, and there stood his younger cousin, Sarah, a kind woman who lived nearby. She looked at me with concern and rushed inside. "Auntie Maggie, what happened? Why are you here? Your face looks swollen from crying." I told her everything again. She held her chest, shook her head, and said, "That landlord must be mad." Sarah was a strong woman. She didn't fear anybody. She told us that she had heard other stories about the landlord doing similar things to other women. Some women kept quiet because they were scared. Some moved out, but no one stood up to him. "He did the worst to you," she said, "and he must not go free." I didn't know what to say. I felt weak and ashamed. But Sarah held my hand and said, "Auntie Maggie, listen. Life is not finished. This is not your end." Her words touched my heart. She continued, "But you need a place to stay while you plan your next move. You can stay with me until you get back on your feet." Tears filled my eyes again, but this time they were tears of gratitude. I moved in with Sarah that same day. Her house was small, but full of warmth. She gave me a corner of her room and space to keep my sewing machine. She even called some of her friends to bring clothes for me to sew. My life slowly began to move again. At first, every day felt heavy. I cried sometimes when I remembered how the landlord threw me out, but Sarah encouraged me. Mr. Benson checked on me often. Slowly, my heart began to heal. Work started coming in. Little by little, I saved money. Sarah's friends liked my sewing and they told more people about me. Soon, I had more work than I expected. I worked day and night, stitching clothes, fixing torn dresses, cutting fabric. I didn't rest much, but I didn't complain. It was better than thinking about my pain. One afternoon, while I was sewing, Sarah rushed inside the room with shocking news. "Auntie Maggie," she said breathlessly, "have you heard, that landlord, something happened to him?" My needle stopped midair. "What happened?" I whispered. She looked at me, eyes wide, and said, "He got into serious trouble last night. The police came for him." I gasped. My heart began to race. "What trouble? Why?" Sarah leaned closer and said in a low voice, "He did the same thing he did to you, but this time he forced himself on the wrong woman." My whole body froze, my eyes widened, my heart jumped. "And the woman's family is not poor," Sarah continued. "They reported him, they want him arrested, they want him punished." I felt a mix of shock, fear, and something I could not explain. After all the pain he caused me, something was finally happening to him. Before I could speak, Sarah held my arm and whispered, "Auntie Maggie, the police want to talk to you too. They want to know if he has done this before." My breath caught. "Me? Talk to the police? About him?" I wasn't ready. I wasn't strong enough. I didn't want to relive that night again. But Sarah looked at me and said, "If you speak, you may help stop him for good." And that was when my hands began to shake. Because what she was asking me to do was the hardest thing I had ever faced in my life. And before I could decide what to do next, something happened. Something that shook me again. Something that pushed me into a new direction I never expected. Just as I opened my mouth to respond, we heard a loud knock outside. A loud, urgent knock. Sarah and I looked at each other. She whispered, "Who is that?" The knock came again, harder this time. My heart began to pound. Because the voice that followed the knock was a voice I never wanted to hear again. "Margaret, open this door." It was the landlord. He had come for me. The sound of his voice froze my whole body. I felt the air leave my lungs. Sarah's eyes widened in shock, and she grabbed my hand so tightly that it almost hurt. How did he find me? Why was he here? Wasn't he supposed to be in trouble with the police? The knock came again, harder, louder, angrier. "Margaret, I know you are inside. Open this door before I break it down." My legs trembled so much I thought I would fall. Sarah quickly pulled me behind her and whispered, "Don't say a word. Let me talk." She walked slowly toward the door, standing just behind it. She didn't open it. She didn't even touch the lock. "Mr. Thompson," she said sharply, "why are you shouting at my door like a madman? What do you want?" His breathing from the other side of the door was heavy, like an animal ready to attack. "Is she inside?" he asked. "I want to talk to her." She does not want to talk to you, Sarah said firmly. Leave now. He banged on the door so hard the frame rattled. I jumped back in fear. Sarah, move away from that door, he growled. The police are coming for me, and I know she reported me. I want her to step outside and withdraw her statement before they get here. Sarah laughed, an angry, fearless laugh. Auntie Maggie didn't report you, she shouted back, but maybe she should. There was silence. A dangerous, heavy silence. Then the landlord shouted, If she doesn't come out now, I swear. We heard footsteps running outside. Then a man's voice shouted, Hey, leave that door alone. Sarah peeped through the window. Her face relaxed immediately. It's Mr. Benson, she whispered. Relief washed over me like cool water. Within seconds, Mr. Benson reached our front door. What is going on here? He demanded. The landlord hissed. Stay out of this, Benson. It's not your business. It is my business, Mr. Benson snapped back. You threw her out like a dog. You want to harass her again. You're shameless. The landlord tried to speak, but Mr. Benson shouted over him. If you don't leave this compound right now, I will drag you to the station myself. Their voices clashed like thunder and lightning. The landlord spat on the ground and said, She thinks she can go free. She will pay. Then he turned sharply and walked away, hissing and muttering. Mr. Benson watched him leave before knocking softly on Sarah's door. It's safe now. You can open. Sarah opened the door slowly. I stepped out from behind her, still shaking like a leaf. Mr. Benson looked at me with worry. Are you all right? I nodded, but my lips were trembling. No, I whispered. I'm scared. He placed a kind hand on my shoulder. You're safe here. He won't touch you. He knows the police are coming for him. He's only shouting because he's afraid. I sank into a chair. My chest was tight. My throat felt dry. Sarah sat beside me and held my hand. It's time to decide, she said gently. Will you speak to the police or not? I took a deep breath. Then another. My heart was beating like drums. I never liked trouble. I never wanted to stand in front of police officers. I never wanted to talk about something so painful again. But I also didn't want him to hurt another woman. Or another girl. Or anyone else. I wiped my tears and whispered, I will speak. Sarah smiled proudly. Mr. Benson nodded. Good, he said. You're stronger than you think. The police came that afternoon. 2 officers, 1 woman, 1 man. They sat with me in Sarah's living room. The female officer held my hand gently and said, You are safe. Take your time. Tell us exactly what he did to you. I told them everything. This time, my hands didn't shake. My voice didn't break. I didn't cry. I spoke like a woman who was tired of being silent. When I finished, the officers wrote everything down. They thanked me and left. Days passed. News spread. The landlord was arrested. Finally. Some tenants said they were happy. Some said he deserved worse. Some were shocked because they believed he was too quiet to do anything bad. But the truth was out now. People saw his real face. With him gone, a heavy weight lifted from my chest. I began to work harder. I saved every little coin I earned. Customers continued to come. My name spread from street to street like wind. Month after month, I saved money quietly. Peace returned to my life. Slowly, the dark memory became a scar instead of a wound. One morning, 6 months later, Sarah rushed into the room with a newspaper in her hand. Auntie Maggie, she shouted, look at this news. I looked at the headline, and my heart stopped. The old building on Oak Street has been put up for sale. That was his building. The house he threw me out of. The house he used to torment women. The house where I cried in the rain. Sarah looked at me with wide eyes. Auntie Maggie, imagine if you owned that house one day. I laughed. A small, weak laugh. Me, Buy a house. That house. It sounded like a dream too big for my small hands. But Sarah didn't laugh. She placed her hand on my shoulder and said, "Nothing is impossible for you." I didn't believe her. Not yet. But something deep inside me whispered, what ifs? Weeks passed. I continued saving every coin. I worked day and night. I stitched clothes until my back hurt. I was still far from the price of the house, but something strange happened. One bright afternoon, a man wearing a suit knocked on Sarah's door. "Good afternoon," he said politely. "I'm looking for Margaret." I stepped forward, confused. "Yes, I'm Margaret." He smiled and handed me a brown envelope. "This is from a client who wants to thank you." "A client?" I asked. "Who?" But the man only smiled. "Open it." I opened the envelope and gasped. Inside was a check. A check with an amount so large I almost fainted. My hands trembled. Sarah screamed. Mr. Benson, who had just arrived, stood with his mouth open. The check was enough to buy something big, something life-changing, something I never thought I would ever touch. I looked at the check again, shaking, unable to believe my eyes. And then Sarah said something that sent shivers down my spine. "Auntie Maggie, this amount can help you buy the house." My heart stopped. Because suddenly, the impossible didn't look impossible anymore. But just before I could speak, just before I could breathe, just before I could even think, the door burst open, and the person who walked in made all of us scream in shock. The door burst open so hard that it hit the wall with a loud bang. Sarah screamed. I dropped the check. Mr. Benson jumped in front of us like a shield. And then, we all froze. Standing at the doorway was the landlord's younger brother, Andrew. Tall, serious, breathing heavily like he ran all the way. My heart almost stopped. For a moment, I thought the landlord himself had escaped from prison. But no, this was Andrew, the quiet brother who used to visit once in a while. He never spoke much. He always looked sad, like a man carrying a heavy burden. But today, his eyes were red. His clothes were wet with sweat. And his face held something I had never seen before, regret. "Maggie," he whispered, stepping inside. "I need to talk to you, please." Sarah blocked him immediately. "Talk to who? After everything your brother did, please get out of this house." But he raised both hands slowly, like someone surrendering. "Please, I'm not here to cause trouble. I came to apologize." The room fell silent. Apologize? My heart beat painfully against my chest. I didn't know how to feel. Sad, angry, afraid, confused. He looked at me with eyes full of shame. "I didn't know how bad things had become," he said quietly. "My brother hid everything from us. The police called me this morning. They said your statement helped other women speak up." Sarah folded her arms. "Good, he deserves everything he gets." Andrew nodded. "I agree. He did terrible things I cannot defend. I am not here to support him." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small bunch of keys. My eyes widened. "These," he said slowly, "are the keys to the house." Sarah gasped. Mr. Benson looked at him in confusion. Andrew continued, "The building is under my care now. The court wants to sell it to pay for damages. I know the price is high, but since you suffered more than anyone, I wanted you to have first choice." He placed the keys on the table gently, like someone placing a newborn baby down. I stared at the keys. They didn't look real. Everything felt like a dream. "I know you can't pay for the whole house now," Andrew said softly, "but I wanted you to know first, before agents start fighting over it." I swallowed hard. My throat felt tight. How life works. How tables turn. How God fights for the weak. Just that morning, I was still wondering how I would ever stand again. Nah. The keys of the very house where I suffered were lying right in front of me, waiting. But before I could touch them, Andrew raised his hand again. "There's more," he whispered. We all looked at him. My brother, before he was arrested, he said something strange, something about threatening someone. The police told me he tried to come here earlier today. Sarah hissed. "We know, he came," he shouted. He wanted to force her to withdraw her statement. Andrew covered his face with his hands. "I'm so ashamed. I am sorry, truly sorry, for everything." I didn't know what to say. My hands were shaking. My breath was shaky. But I finally found my voice. "Why are you really here?" I asked softly. "Is it only to apologize?" He took a deep breath. "I came to warn you. Some of my brother's friends, they are angry about his arrest. They think you ruined his life. They may try to scare you." Sarah stepped forward angrily. "They should try it and see madness." But Andrew shook his head. "No, you have to be careful, at least for a while." Silence filled the room. A thick, heavy silence. Then he stood up gently. "The house will be advertised tomorrow morning," he said. "But since you suffered the most, if you raise even half of the payment, I will delay the sale for you. I will give you time." My breath caught. Half? Could I raise half? I thought of the check. I thought of my months of saving. I thought of every cloth I stitched, every night I worked. The numbers began to form in my head. And then, something unbelievable happened. Sarah picked up the check and handed it to Andrew. "Look at the amount," she said proudly. He opened it. His eyes widened. "What?" he gasped. "Who gave you this?" "A client," I whispered. "Someone who wanted to thank me." He shook his head slowly. "Maggie, this is more than half. This is enough to pay almost everything." Sarah screamed and hugged me. Mr. Benson clapped his hands like a happy child. But I just stood there, frozen. My heart was beating too fast. I had enough money to buy the house. The same house I had been thrown out of. The same house the landlord used to torment women. Mr. Benson grabbed the keys from the table and placed them in my shaking hand. "These belong to you now," he said firmly. My fingers closed around the keys. Cold metal. Warm tears. Andrew signed the papers that same week. The police processed the legal parts. The court approved the sale. And just like that, I became the owner of the house. The house where I cried now became the house I owned. But fate was not done with me yet. 3 months later, after repairs and painting, I reopened the building, not as a rented house, but as a home for women starting over. Widows, single mothers, abandoned girls, women running from abusive places. I gave them safe rooms. I taught them sewing. I gave them the support I once prayed for. People began calling me Grandma Maggie the Helper. Some came to thank me. Some came to cry in my arms. Some came to start life again. My small sewing business grew into a big one. I taught over 20 women how to sew. Some opened their own shops. Some became tailors for big boutiques. I watched their lives change, and it warmed my heart. But the greatest lesson of my journey was simple. Where you suffer today may become the place God lifts you tomorrow. Years later, I happened to walk past the room where I once slept, the same room where I cried after being pushed out. I stood there, smiling. Because pain did not win. Because shame did not finish me. Because evil did not destroy me. I bought the house. I rebuilt it. I transformed it. And I became stronger. As I locked the gate that evening, I heard Sarah shout from the kitchen window, "Auntie Maggie, dinner is ready." I smiled. Life had changed. Life had become beautiful. Life had become my victory. But just as I turned around to walk into the house, I saw something that made me freeze on the spot. Someone was standing outside the gate. Someone I never expected to see again. Someone who made my heart jump in fear. The shadow of the landlord, freshly released from prison. In the end, I learned that strength is not about how loudly you shout, but how firmly you stand when life pushes you to the ground. My landlord thought he had destroyed me, but his wickedness only pushed me toward my destiny. The house he used to threaten me became the house I proudly owned. My story is a reminder that no matter who tries to stop you, as long as you refuse to give up on yourself, life will open a door that no one can close. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to this channel for more. Don't forget to drop your comment.